Welcome to Hamburgers and Horror, the home of meat, monsters, and mysterious new neighbors hoping to nibble on your necks. I'm Noah Hook, and today we're looking at Salem's Lot.
Open the window, Mark. Please. Let me in. It's okay, Mark. I'm your friend. He commands it. Look at me.
This 1979 two-part horror miniseries follows a writer who returns to his hometown to draft a novel about an infamous old house. But when people around the sleepy Maine town start dying mysteriously, he discovers that the owner of the mansion is actually a vampire who is turning them into an army of undead slaves. Salem's Lot is of course based on Stephen King's 1975 novel of the same name. We've covered a lot of King adaptations on the channel like The Mist, The Shining, Cujo, and Misery, and I'm super excited to add this iconic vampire tale to that list. This was only King's second novel, being released just a year after Carrie. That hugely successful film had producers chomping at the bit for the next story of his that they could bring to the big screen. Warner Brothers ultimately bought the rights, but turning a 400-page novel into a 90-minute movie proved a lot tougher than they thought. They ultimately decided to extend it into a TV miniseries, with the final product being just a little over 3 hours. So I think this officially overtakes The Wailing as the longest piece of media I've covered on the channel. Screenwriter Paul Monash of films like Carrie and All Quiet on the Western Front was brought in to write the teleplay. Those of you who have read a King book know that his stories are often flush and overflowing with characters and subplots, so many of them had to be condensed or combined or outright deleted from what happens in the film, but otherwise it largely follows the same plot lines. My personal king, Tobe Hooper, of Texas Chainsaw, Poltergeist, and Life Force fame, was hired to direct the series. I know it's obvious, but I just have to say out loud how fucking cool it is that there's a horror experience with Stephen King and Tobe Hooper involved. And even with some characters condensed or missing, this is still a King story with a big ensemble cast of characters to bring this small Maine town to life. Salem's Lot stars David Soul from Filth and Starsky and Hutch as Ben Mears, James Mason from The Verdict and Lolita as Richard Straker, Lance Kerwin from Outbreak and Enemy Mine as Mark Petrie, Bonnie Bodelia from Die Hard 1 and 2 as Susan Norton, Lou Ayres from All Quiet on the Western Front and Omen 2 as Jason Burke, Ed Flanders from The Exorcist 3 and The Ninth Configuration as Bill Norton, and Reggie Nalder from The Bird with a Crystal Plumage as Kurt Barlow. Cinematography was handled by Jules Brenner of Return of the Living Dead and Johnny Got His Gun, and Harry Suckman from Someone's Watching Me and 40 Guns composed the score. Salem's Lot premiered on CBS in 1979, and it was met with mostly positive reviews. Critics praised the miniseries' atmosphere, cinematography, Hooper's direction, and scares, although contemporary audiences do find it overly long and slow. It currently has an 89 and 65% on Rotten Tomatoes, along with a 3.3 on Letterboxd, so it still has a lot of love though. In the years following its broadcast, Salem's Lot has accumulated a cult following and has had a significant impact on the vampire genre, with Midnight Mass feeling especially relevant in my mind. Thank you so much to my patron Jason for requesting Salem's Lot for me to review. I had seen bits and pieces of it when I was a kid, but it wasn't until 5 years ago or so that I actually sat down and watched the whole thing. I enjoyed it back then, and I'm excited to see if it still holds up for me now, but with all that said, it's probably time we get started. I hope y'all are ready to watch a middle-aged man rizz up a woman half his age, but also become best friends with her dad at the same time, cause we're watching Salem's Lot. The miniseries opens in Zimico, a fictional town in Guatemala, where a man named Ben Mears and a young boy named Mark Petrie are stocking up on holy water. The Jesus juice begins to glow, warning the boys that something evil has found them, but more on that very later. We jump back 2 years earlier as Ben is making his return to his small hometown of Salem's Lot, short for Jerusalem's Lot, in Maine. He's a successful author, and he's hoping to write a new story about the Marston House, an old, ominous property on a hilltop which has a reputation for being haunted. His plan to rent the house is foiled due to a mysterious new arrival in town who recently purchased it. His name is Richard Straker, and he's in the process of opening up an antique shop with his unseen business partner, Kurt Barlow. The local realtors, Larry and Bonnie, send Ben to a boarding house run by a woman named Eva, and Bro wastes zero time asking out an art teacher named Susan Norwood, who happens to be reading one of his books. That night, Straker finds Ben creeping on his home a second time, but dude doesn't seem to mind too much. This has gotten the attention of Constable Gillespie, who enlists local drunk Weasel to keep an eye on him. And apparently Ben and Susan's first date was with her parents? The fuck? We do learn that Eva and Weasel are exes, which is fitting since they are snooping on Ben's writing together. In his notes, Ben describes the Marston house as a monument of evil that's been slowly growing over the years. Uh-oh. Ben and Susan each have a nice exposition dump where we learn that she was a New York designer who got let go and retreated home to Salem's Lot, and she is seeing another guy named Ned. And we learn that Ben is a widower whose wife died 2 years ago. Womp womp. Then they have a makeout sesh by a lake like they're 14 years old. Nice. Straker has Larry procure 2 handymen to deliver a sideboard from the Portland docks back to his home, and they must also buy padlocks to secure all of the doors in the home before they leave. Ben reconnects with his old teacher Dr. Burke, and Susan seems to dump Ned for her new middle-aged man. We also learn Larry and Bonnie are having an affair, with the latter cheating on her lazy drunk husband Cully. He secretly hires Ned and local gravedigger Mike to pick up the sideboard from Portland instead of going himself, as he's got a sneaking suspicion of what's going on. He leaves to stalk his wife just in time to miss Mike's dog Faithful get killed off screen. Meanwhile, theater kid and horror movie buff Mark Petrie is leading the school's annual pageant with Dr. Burke, which happens to be focused on the Marston house. Bitches in this town just love this old ass house, don't they? This is absolute music to Ben's ears, who believes he saw the ghost of the infamous town child molester Hubie Marston as a little boy. Okay. Ever since the house's construction, it has been riddled with death, causing Ben to believe the house itself is evil. He's also mad sus of the 2 dudes apparently living together in the house now. Take it easy, Ben, this review is happening in 2025. Ned and Mike deliver the supposed sideboard to the Marston house, and they notice it has a strangely cold effect on its surroundings. Ned insists that they pry open the crate to see what's inside, but some creepy noises cause them to flee without locking up the house. Mark's friends, Danny and Ralphie Glick, are cutting through the forest on their way home when the two get separated. That's very bad news for little Ralphie, who Straker brings back to his obliterated crate in a body bag. Cully catches Bonnie and Larry canoodling, and she tries to accuse the poor guy of raping her. He holds Larry up at gunpoint before letting him run, unaware that there was a vampire waiting right outside. Ben and Susan find him dead in his car, and Constable Gillespie is very suspicious of this new face. Later that night, Danny Glick is visited by his newly vampirized brother. Their parents find Danny collapsed in his room and bring him to the hospital. The next day, Mike finds his dead dog, and during a search for Ralphie, Ben comes across a piece of fabric pretty similar to Straker's black suit. Gillespie pops in to question Straker about his mysterious partner and requests that he bring his black suits to be examined. He, Barlow, and Ben are all on the constable's radar for the recent kidnapping and murder. Ben shares his fears with Dr. Norton, aka Susan's dad, about the Marston house, but he's a man of science and doubts there's anything supernatural going on. That night, Ralphie pays his brother another visit at the hospital, who once again feels compelled to let him in. Ralph gives his bro a chomp. These badass vampire levitations were accomplished by placing the actors on a boom crane instead of the traditional wires to avoid them being visible in the final cut. The levitation sequences were also shot in reverse to make the scenes more eerie. I think it's super successful. That morning, a nurse finds Danny geeked the fuck out. Straker drops off his suits to Gillespie, although there don't seem to be any pieces ripped off like the piece found in the woods. Oh, it also looks like Cully and bruised up Bonnie are leaving town. What a fairy tale ending. Susan is leaving town for a few days for a job interview in Boston, but Ben opts to stick around for Danny Glick's funeral. Mike goes into a trance while burying Danny, jumping down into the grave to release the little vampire. Meanwhile, the FBI has done its homework on Gillespie's prime suspects. Damn, Constable, I didn't know you were hooked up like that. Straker is British and here on an extended visa. Barlow is of German descent but fled to Britain in the 20s, and he's been in business with Straker since the 40s. Mears is from Salem's Lot, left at the age of 10, wife died 2 years ago, and seemingly has no connection to Straker and Barlow. Ben and Burke's lunch is interrupted by a sickly Mike who shares that he's been out of it since the Glick funeral. Apparently he slept in the graveyard all night, dreaming about bright yellow eyes that he allowed inside his home. Uh-oh. And that night, Mark is visited by Danny, who really wants to come inside. Mark nearly gives in, but uses his horror movie knowledge to scare Danny away with a cross. Burke notices 2 bite marks on Mike's neck while letting him stay the night, and he calls up Ben in a panic. He explains that the window was closed and locked when he went to sleep, but he overheard Mike invite someone inside. Now there is a single drop of blood on Mike's shirt, but there are no longer any marks on his neck. The two are definitely on the same page about what they think is going on, but in order to not sound like a pair of crazies, they simply call in Gillespie so he can draw his own conclusions. Although they do pull Norton aside and share their theory with him. Today finally marks the opening of Ye Old Antique Shop, so everybody here is checking out old crap they can't afford. Ben finally works up the courage to talk with Straker, sharing his fascination with the Marston house and its dark history. Straker invites Ben to visit the house once Barlow arrives, as he's sure his partner would deeply enjoy him. A surprise beating from Ned leaves Ben concussed in the hospital, where Norton agrees to get him a crucifix despite not believing in vampires. Meanwhile, a noise leads Burke upstairs, where Vampire Mike has returned to show off his nasty new teeth. Burke hits him with that religious riz and yeets him out the window though. Sadly, all this excitement causes Burke to have a heart attack that takes him out of commission for the rest of the film. Alright folks, we're over 2 hours in and Barlow finally decides to make his grand reveal to kill Ned. Susan shares that Ned and Mrs. Glick have both died from anemia, so Dr. Norton is starting to get on the vampire train as well. Oh, turns out Ned Tebbets and a dead baby at the hospital have also both gone missing, and Ben has Susan collect hawthorn to repel the vampires from their home. Mark's parents have brought in a priest to address his supposed nightmare involving Danny, but they suddenly get hit with some poltergeist shit. Barlow kills the parents by conking their heads together. Man, that's some real Looney Tunes shit. Barlow's iconic makeup involved glowing contact lenses invented by Jack Young. According to Toby Hooper, the makeup on actor Reggie Nalder would constantly fall off, as well as the fake nails and dentures, and even the contact lenses would go sideways. On top of that, they were so uncomfortable they could only be worn for 15 minutes at a time before they had to be removed to let the eyes rest for 30 minutes. Straker offers the priest a deal. Barlow will release the boy if he faces the vampire in a battle of faith. It doesn't go well for the guy, but at least Mark gets away. I guess dude's faith just wasn't strong enough because just moments later, Ben is able to use a fucking popsicle stick to burn the shit out of the newly reanimated Marjorie Glick. Okay, bye! In an off-screen phone call, Ben supposedly speaks with a vampire expert who explains that Straker is Barlow's human familiar, basically his watchdog servant, and that their best chance at killing the vampire will be during the day while he's sleeping in his coffin. Thank you very much, unseen vampire expert. The next day, it seems most of the town has been hit with that first phase of vampirism where they feel exhausted, also recalling strange dreams of the recently deceased. Susan rolls up to the Marston house by herself for plot purposes, just in time to see Mark sneak in for revenge. Damn, lil bro brought his own wooden stakes and everything. They wander around the dark, dirty, eccentric home for a while, but the two ultimately get got by Straker. Oh, Constable Gillespie refuses to join the fight. Honestly can't blame him, but he gives Ben his gun before fleeing town. Ben and Norton load up on holy water before finally heading to the Marston house, where they bump into Mark as he apparently managed to Houdini his way out. I didn't even think to mention it earlier, but dude had this weird thing where he liked to ask his dad to tie him up and then he would get out. So I guess it ties in here, but yeah, it's an interesting character trait. Norton wanders right into Straker though, who uses his superhuman strength to impale him on a wall of antlers. Good stuff. Old boy eats a ton of bullets as he descends the staircase, but that is enough to kill the vampire's henchmen. Ben and Mark rush down to the cellar and locate Barlow's coffin hidden away in the dark, surrounded by a small horde of his victims. They drag the coffin out to where the little bit of remaining light might hit it. They pop the bad boy open and Ben stabs the vampire with a stake, hammering it into his chest as Barlow tries to fight back. The vampire minions awake as well, although Mark manages to temporarily lock them up. Oh, okay, Barlow dries up into a dusty skeleton, and despite believing that Susan is one of the vampires in the cellar, Ben lights the entire Marston house ablaze. That was easier than I expected. The wind is blowing towards town, so all of Salem's lot will be purified, although Ben knows that the surviving vampires will try to hunt them down. So this takes us back to Guatemala 2 years later, where Ben and Mark have just become aware of a vampire nearing their location. When they return to their lodging, Ben finds none other than Susan, who's now a full-blown vampire waiting in his bed. She declares her love for him and shares that they can stay young forever, but instead of letting her bite him, Ben stabs her in the heart with a wooden stake to end the movie. And that's Salem's Lot. Yeah, in a lot of ways, this still really holds up as a fantastic vampire film. And yeah, I know it's not actually a film per se, but I'm just gonna call it that for simplicity's sake. Along with many other King adaptations, I just have a real soft spot in my heart for these small New England town settings and the characters. All of his stories do a great job of world building and giving you a sense of community, and the movie does a pretty good job at this as well. I mean, it does help that this thing's 3 fucking hours long, but that's beside the point. I saw someone's Letterboxd review describing this as porridge horror, essentially saying that it's a bit bland but super comforting, and yeah, I think that description is right on the money. This movie feels like a nice warm hug in a chilly, foggy woodland Maine cemetery. You're largely not watching it to be scared out of your mind or to see some fucked up shit. It offers a slower horror that hides in the background most of the film, occasionally popping out near dusk to make its ghostly presence known. And those occasions really are something special. Even as a grown man, those window scenes are so haunting, and it's honestly the slow pace that makes them so creepy. Most horror movie monsters rely on quick cuts and jump scares to scare audiences, but these creatures just loom in the scenes they're in, just soaking up the metaphorical sun. The film trades in quick, cheap scares for extremely extended scenes more focused on building dread. That shot where the vampires are creeping up on Mark near the end is such a good example of this. But Barlow is actually much more fast-paced, and you don't get to see too much of him on screen compared to the other vampires. I think a lot of that had to do with the complications with the makeup, but I largely don't mind that because the makeup looks so good when he is on screen. I mean, yeah, he's basically Nosferatu, but the blue skin and crazy eyeballs add such a specific uncanny feel that's hard to describe. It's one of the few elements here that really feels like crazy zany Tobe Hooper, and it contrasts the feel of this small New England town so well. And this is Hooper at probably his most reserved, which makes sense given that this was made for TV. Most of the kills are cut away from, zoomed really far into, or simply freeze framed. There is like no blood in these 3 hours, which in my opinion is a no-no for a vampire film. I also think the film could have been a little more sexy. There's a lot of chemistry between Ben and Susan, but I honestly don't think it was capitalized on enough throughout, and I also think the general use of like vampire hypnosis and seduction could have been used a bit more as well. But I will say that the biggest diminishing factor of Salem's Lot for me is similar to a lot of other people's in that its pacing and overall length is just too long and slow. On this channel, I've talked a lot about the great value that slow burn horror films have, but Salem's Lot doesn't really feel like a pressure cooker that's building to something bigger. It keeps the same low pressure as it bounces between like 15 characters for most of the runtime. 90% of the scenes here could have easily been cut down by at least a few seconds, and unless you really care about the book and all of its different side characters and subplots, you'll probably find a lot of the subplots here totally unnecessary. As somebody who's never read the book, I just don't think the love triangle subplot needed to be there at all. Like, I liked it in the sense I felt like I was watching like a funny TV drama, but it really adds nothing to the larger story, and none of the characters even make it into the second half, so it really feels like they're just filling up space. I'd like to think that I have a pretty good attention span, and I purposefully watch a lot of really dull and boring movies. Like, I just go onto Tubi and throw on total dog shit. But even here, there was a couple times where my eyes glazed over a little bit just waiting for something interesting to happen. And outside of the creeping vampires, the antler kill, and Barlow's overall look, I have to say the finale leaves a little bit to be desired as well. We waited 3 hours to see Barlow do some cool shit just for him to get killed in his box almost immediately. I think there's maybe 3 minutes where Barlow is on screen, and for me who loves monsters, like, I need more than that, come on. But while the length and slow pacing does make Salem's Lot a film I don't return to very often, both times I've seen it I have had a really fun time watching it. It's not like a fast, dumb popcorn flick that you can throw on once a year. At least for me, this is something that I'll watch every few years, and I have to really focus and really sink my teeth into it. Oh, another element that I pretty immediately clocked this time around and then confirmed with other people's reviews is the film's very strange treatment of Straker and Barlow as a couple. The old conservative townsfolk aren't straightforwardly homophobic or anything, but they all seem quite perplexed by the supposed pair of old men who work and live together, operating an antique shop and saying ciao to the locals. Vampires have long been embodiments of sexual taboos, and it seems like Hooper and Minash wanted to play with that a bit here. It's like, what if a vampire moved in next door, but he was also gay? The horror! You can always count on Tobe Hooper to poke fun at traditional American values, and I always love him for it. All in all, I do think Salem's Lot is a wonderful mixture of Hooper and King. It's chock full of familiar vampire tropes, so there isn't much of a learning curve when it comes to the rules, allowing you to get absorbed into the long, beautiful shots of the town. It meanders around and sometimes loses focus, but it's anchored by some pretty good character development and some really great scares. I wouldn't quite put it in the top tier of vampire films like Let the Right One In, Dracula, The Hunger, and The Lost Boys, but it isn't that far behind either. I'd easily take it over most of the crappy vampire films we get each year. Salem's Lot is a cozy, atmospheric, haunting take on vampires that I really do enjoy. If you've never seen it and have a few hours to kill, I definitely recommend you check it out sometime. Well, that's about it. Thank you so much to my patron Jason for requesting Salem's Lot for me to review. This was a really nice change of pace from the later Texas Chainsaw films that I've been reviewing lately. Although between this, the Texas Chainsaw franchise, Misery, Life Force, and Vampire Hunter D, we've really been on a Hooper King vampire vortex the past couple of months, haven't we? But anyway, what did y'all think of Salem's Lot? Did it terrify you as a kid? Did you find it too long? Be sure to let me know down in the comments. And while you're there, let me know what your favorite vampire film of all time is. I think for me, it might be Fright Night, but I feel like it changes every once in a while too, so I'm not too certain. And be sure to tune in 2 weeks as we check out Texas Chainsaw 2022. That is sure to be a really fun time. Thank you all so much for joining me, and an extra thank you to my patrons. As always, I'm Noah Hook, and thanks for watching Hamburgers and Horror. Stay safe out there. Thanks for watching my review of Salem's Lot. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to like and subscribe so you can keep up with all my horror reviews. And if you want to help support the channel further, you should check out my Patreon account. You'll be able to vote for future movies and franchises I cover on the channel. Thanks, y'all.